Just to repeat a little part of the Alter Rebbe over here, which is based on a Gemara, and then we'll continue in the text. So Alter Rebbe says, brings a Gemara. The Gemara says the Beinanim Zevaz Shefton.
I think is actually.
I'm missing that.
Right.
Okay.
Missing
Which
that.
Yeah, I got this one.
Twice?
Yeah. She's missing V'lachei Nefesh Elokis.
Oh, yeah? This one?
Yeah.
This one we said we were going to
Yeah.
start?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So Rebbe explains the Gemara, beautiful Gemara, where the Gemara says that Beinanim Zevaz Shefton. So really, to really understand this, we can't recap much of Yud Beis because that will take away really the significant part of the time tonight. So we'll just explain based on this, where the Alter Rebbe explains the Beinani that his Nefesh Elikis, his Nefesh Habahamis, which means his animal soul, his Yetzer Hara, is fully intact, because if you remember, the one who made a dent into his Nefesh Habahamis is already called a tzaddik on the multiple thousands and even tens of thousands, Lashon Alter Rebbe Revavot, which is tens of thousands of different levels, which means the moment one makes a true dent in his animal soul, he's already considered a tzaddik. A Beinani didn't even make a dent in his animal soul. His animal soul is completely intact. And had we translated that one could serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu 10 years, he could have the same tests as 10 years ago. Doesn't that say that he didn't make a dent? Right? That's a very simple way of looking at it. That I, 10 years ago, had this test, and then 10 years later, I never gave in to that temptation, which means I never allowed it to enter into my action, nor my speech, nor my thought. 10 years later, I have the same test and the same challenge. That, in other words, says that I really didn't make a true dent in my animal soul, because if I would make a true dent in my animal soul, I wouldn't have the exact same test. I would have a different type of test, a test of less struggle, or the same scenario would be less struggle for me. The fact that it's the same struggle for me, that shows I never made a dent into my nefesh bahamis, never made a dent into my animal soul. Simple, right? And Alter Rebbe says that's the Beinani. The Beinani is somebody who never made a dent in his nefesh bahamis, animal soul. So, in the same token, why could we call him a Rasha? Rasha, didn't we say Rasha is somebody who could chas v'shalom would the definition of a Rasha if someone transgresses? And we say transgression, we're not going to go into the whole thing because we elaborated on this multiple times. We say transgression means may it be action, may it be speech, may it be thought. One transgression, one's called a Rasha. This is based on the Gemara. That's we had the first page. The smallest transgression, meaning a rabbinic transgression, rather a Torah transgression, a rabbinic transgression, to the extent that if you see someone transgressing, you have the ability to prevent him or her, and you do not, you're also called a Rasha. It means the smallest transgression, someone's called a Rasha. How does that go together saying that the Beinani, which is not a Rasha, right, is a Beinani, his nefesh bahamis is fully intact? Not a question. Because when we say he's fully intact, the challenges are the same, but he never gives in. It means to say that his challenge could be extremely, the scenario which he confronts could be extremely challenging, but he never gives in. I have a juicy interest in talking Lashon Hara, or I have an interest in throwing out a juicy piece of Lashon Hara, I will close my mouth. So why do I have an interest in spitting out a juicy piece of the Lashon Hara and get everybody to laugh, and then everybody will take home that piece of Lashon Hara with excitement home? Why? Because my nefesh bahamis is extremely intact. If I was a tzaddik, if it would make a dent in nefesh bahamis, it wouldn't interest me so much, because I'm more interested in God and godliness, the chas v'shalom to suddenly do something which is contrary to Ratzon Hashem. The fact that I have the same taiva, I have the same temptation, shows it's completely intact. Why don't they do it? Because Hashem says not to, and I'm the Beinani, which does not want to be a Rasha for even one moment. So the Nefesh Bahamis is all there, but I never allow it to come in. So just so we can understand, just let me culminate this, just like I can understand in action and speech, so too in thought. I could have a temptation, right, to think about something inappropriate, which Hashem says you're not allowed to entertain your mind with, and yet I will hold myself back and not allow that thought to come in. Why do I have that temptation? Because I'm not a tzaddik.
It's hard to believe that after all that good behavior for all those years, that he is tempted in exactly the same way.
Yeah.
Why would the temptation not, if not disappear, at least diminish?
Yeah, so my question is, and if we're only honest with ourselves, don't we find ourselves many times with the exact same temptations as 10, 15, 20 years before? A simple question. I think just to answer the question is more look at the reality and see. So you could say that could be that because we did not overcome our temptations, that's why it overcomes us, because we're not so strong, because we're not Beinanim. Maybe that's part of your question, that had we been the true Beinani and on a constant basis went over Yetzer Hara, perhaps it would have made a dent. But the fact is that even someone who does constantly fight his Yetzer Hara, fact is, 5 years later, you could walk out in the street and have the same Nisai, the same test as 5 years before. As we all see it, that we encounter the same exact challenges. And the question is why, and the overall, Hashem put us in a situation that we have to have all the time on a constant basis. These challenges are a separate question. We'll find out later what Hashem gains from it. But the answer is the reality that we could sit by 10 people on the table and people start talking, and we have this incentive to spit out a word of Lashon Hara. We walk out in the street and there's something inappropriate. Hashem says, do not entertain your mind with that, and we have the temptation too, and we have to hold ourselves back. What happened now and 10 years before? The fact is that it's still around. That itself shows that I did not make a dent. Why didn't I make a dent? Because the dent in my nefesh happens because I'm not a tzaddik. Is it a big thing to be a Beinani? It's still a big thing to be a Beinani, because a Beinani never gives in once. Now, if you think about somebody never giving in once, truly, never giving once, not to action, not to thought, not to speech. You know, Rebbe brings the Gemara that the real challenge is thought, as we all know it so well. To keep a 24/7 of complete and pure thought is something which is an enormous struggle. So you could still define the Beinani as a very special person, that he never gives in to even an inappropriate thought.
But it's the action that's really the bottom line.
It's all three. Hashem told us, He gave us a Torah, and He says, I'm dividing the Torah. The Torah generally is divided, is compartmentalized into three: action, speech, and thought. Just like action does damage to our neshama, Hashem says certain mitzvahs I gave you on the positive side of speech. We daven with speech, we don't daven with action. And similarly, on the negative side, on Leisaseh, we are not to speak Lashon Hara. Speech. Speaking Lashon Hara has nothing to do with action. It's a transgression, it's a violation, which is solely dependent on speech. And then Hashem says, I have another package within Torah, which is called machshava. May on the positive side also, when a kain, for example, sacrifices the carbon, he has to make sure that it's l'shem for the person who is bringing the carbon. For this carbon, I mean, there's all machshava plays an important role in our Torah mitzvahs on the positive, and as well on the negative. V'leisa surah, Hashem says, you're not allowed to entertain your thought. This which the nefesh, the animal soul, has an innate inclination to entertain itself with. So it's really divided. Exactly, thought, speech, and action. Therefore, a Rasha, is defined a Russian when he transgresses not only action, but may it be speech, may it be thought. Which means if he deliberately knows, in other words, if you see the previous classes, when it takes sometimes a person takes a moment to notice, but the idea of it is that the moment he notices, and you're dealing with a true moment if someone's very honest with himself, right? Someone says, well, after a few seconds I stopped thinking about this. Well, those few seconds were a very, very strong violation in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Torah mitzvahs when Hashem says should not entertain his mind with certain thoughts. We're not dealing with a few seconds. If you're talking about a split second, it means that the honest person, the moment he notices this is not what Hashem wants, he pushes it away. He doesn't allow it to enter his mind willingly and deliberately. And when he does that, he prevents himself of being the Rasha to being the Beinani. But the moment he says, okay, for 5 seconds I will, after that I will not, for those 5 seconds, the Rasha is not a Beinani. So Beinani is someone who never allows it to come. The moment he enters, so he says, miyad, in the 12th chapter, miyad, right away when he realizes, right, not in this period, but he says, right away when he realizes this is something inappropriate, he doesn't accept it. So he's a Beinani. But the question is, why does he have the struggle? This is the biggest proof that he really didn't make a dent into Nefesh Bahamis. This is what the Alter Rebbe is saying. That's why it's such a... One of the things we pointed out in the previous classes is that in one hand it could be very discouraging. Very discouraging. A person 10, 15, 20, 30 years doing have the same test. But on the other hand, it's so encouraging. Because most of the problems a person has is Avodas Hashem when he doesn't have any clarity. I'm serving God for so many years. I mean, it's not the real me, and the real me is somebody who loves Hashem. I don't have any... And then when they have the same challenges, and they believe they're tzaddikim, or they believe they're these godly angels, and they're really not, so that confusion does so much worse in our Avodas Hashem as opposed to when there is that clarity. Yes, I'm a Beinani, I'm on the verge in a sense of a Rasha, because I have the same temptations, the same challenges, any bum on the street. That's what Alter Rebbe explains beautifully, the Mishnah. Kirasha, right? If you remember the first page of the Rebbe says, Mashpim Meisi, you make the person swear to it. When the neshama comes down, they make the person swear, be a tzaddik, do not be a rasha, and then it says that the whole world tells you you're a tzaddik. In your eyes, you should be kirasha. So the Rebbe points out over here, and then he asks later, it says a person should not be a rasha in his eyes. So apparently to contradict again, if you can see the first few lines of Tanya, the Rebbe says, if you look into the Gemara, you see the precision that in the beginning it says they make a person swear to be a tzaddik, not to be a rasha. But in your eyes, you should be kirasha. The Rebbe says, you see the Mishnah put in, the Gemara put in one letter, which is kir. Kirasha means you're really on the verge. If you think about the distance of the Beni and the Rasha, in one hand, he's never a Rasha, which means he's really removed in thought, speech, and action from the phenomenon of a Rasha. But how close is he in his vulnerability? Like a thread. The tzaddik, because he made a dent in his nefesh bahamis, in his animal soul, he's by definition removed from being a Rasha. You cannot call it tzaddik kirasha like a Rasha. Because if he made a dent, and especially take the far extreme tzaddik, which the one who's really made not only a dent, but he transformed his nefesh bahamis. He doesn't have the average taivas the average person has. Him and a rasha, night and day, like east and west.
From your description, I don't think I know anyone who's a Beinoni. Because how many...
Maybe you're the Beinoni.
No, but you wouldn't have 5 seconds where you might entertain...
But you have Beinoni moments, that's the only thing.
Well, that's depressing.
Well, the Beinoni moments, in a sense, like I think we once said it over here, it's like the kid came over to his parent and he said, Yom Kippur, he said, I'm greater than you. You fast once on Yom Kippur, I fast 5 times between breakfast and lunch and lunch.
But I
and supper.
agree with you, Sherry, that it seems quite depressing.
But why is it depressing? It's so encouraging.
That's right.
Why?
It's
I
not
think
that
it's
you're
so
seeing yourself Rasha. You are a Rasha because you can. I don't know if you could ever aspire to being a Beinoni with this very strict definition of the term.
You know what? Maybe I'm not explaining it right. I don't think there's somebody who gave the ability with that laden out clarity, like the Alter Rebbe, which gave the average person the ability to really be a Beinoni. Once we know who we are, can I ask you?
People could say that they don't go through life with a thought. Okay, even if you don't make any mistakes, certainly conscious mistakes.
Okay.
Or your action, sometimes a thought, exactly.
Yeah.
A thought.
A thought.
So who said?
So that makes you a Russia.
Right. So what's the? Well, let's talk about conceptually. If you see like this, if we can't, it's not with our ability. So then you could say, well, that's impossible. The moment you understand that it's with my ability, within my reach, and within my ability to accept the thought or not accept the thought, it could be more difficult, but it's so attainable. That's the word. That's the idea. It's not something which inevitably has to come. A thought could come up, but the moment I, in my conscious mind, say, this is not what I'm supposed to do, Hashem clearly said, not the Tanya says, Hashem says in the Torah, you're not allowed to, so I say no.
You're blurring thought with action. I'm
right,
not really
that's
clear
where
on
I
what
was going to go.
mean. Are you saying
that's right.
Having a thought, I want to go and eat treif, or I want to break
the average person doesn't think about it.
Or a thought, like maybe a negative not even going to speak Lashon Hara. But let's say I want to think badly about Honey. That's right. I have a bad thought about Honey. She didn't call me back. She's a bad friend. So I have that thought for a second.
Right.
So we're just going to say, first of
all,
but I'm with you like that. As long as I didn't act on it and say anything to hurt, I had control, but my thought was in there.
Let's clarify again. When it comes to thought, first of all, I'm thinking to eat treif. I'm thinking on Shabbos I'm going to open the light. First of all, a healthy for me, it doesn't think on Shabbos to open the light. And if he does, it's not an Avera. Why? Because if you look in the Torah, Hashem says, doesn't say anywhere in the Torah, do not think to put on the light.
Right.
So just don't put on the light. It's just a silly thought. Right. Am I thinking that I'm going to walk on my hands? It's not a normal thought, but it's not a bad thing. It's just a silly thing, right? The same thing, I'm thinking to open the light on Shabbos. The light's not going to go on. The light's not going to go on if I'm going to think about putting a light on Shabbos. It does nothing. It's like a silly thought.
Right.
And therefore, the whole idea of putting a light on Shabbos is based on, in other words, the whole violation of Shabbos when you actually put on the light, because that's what it says in the Torah, that Shabbos is classified in obviously there's certain things of speech and even thought, namely speech, but also action. In other words, the words of Shabbos are not the same as the words of. But one second. So when it comes to, so let's classify what machshava means, what thought means.
Right.
When I think about opening a light Shabbos, it's more like a silly thought because it won't gain, the light won't open, I won't be able to use the light, and therefore the whole violation of Shabbos in the context of opening the light is actually opening the light. Period. Right? So where's the transgression of thought? So the transgression of thought, Alter Rebbe himself says. If you looked in it's basically, again, I invite you to, I don't want to use my own words because Alter Rebbe was very, very clear in this 11th chapter. Do you have that, your Tanya with you, that small?
No.
You know. Okay, so just look in the beginning of 11th chapter. If you had a chance, you see the Alter Rebbe, and basically I'll just encapsulate the concept, basically thoughts of immodesty. Okay?
Dirty thoughts.
That is where the that is where the test. That is where the test. Wait.
Free reign.
No. So that is it's thought of immodest thoughts. That's what the Torah says. Nothing to do with Alter Rebbe. Alter Rebbe just says what the Gemara says, and the Gemara says what the Torah says.
When you say thought, that's what you mean.
That's what the Torah means. We say it every day in Davening. It's very limited.
It might not be your type.
As much as it's limited, that is the central struggle of a Frumei Yid. The central struggle of a Frumei Yid is his to keep a pure thought. To keep a thought that never entertain with things with thoughts which are immodest. And again, I'm just saying this because this is what the simple meaning of the pasuk. It is associated with idolatry, but also if you look in the clear halacha, it's associated with thoughts of immodesty. And then we're prohibited to entertain our mind with thoughts of immodesty. Fact. That is according to Torah the struggle or our mandate as Frumei Yidden in the Leisas, and also there's the positive, but let's talk about the negative right now, not to entertain our thought with immodest thoughts. It's a struggle much more than not opening a light on Shabbos for the Frumei Yidden, and a struggle more than not speaking Lashon Hara. Because not speaking Lashon Hara, I could walk out of the room, I could close my mouth, bite my tongue. Here, thought is something which is, thought is, right? Especially, take a world like we live in today. You know, the whole, wherever we go, in a sense, it's a world which is provocative in a sense, because the whole, especially a world like today, it is challenging. Again, for the average Frumei Yid, where does he have his ongoing challenge? It's based on a Gemara, because the problems were not only today, it was all the way back then, because the phenomenon has existed back, and that's why the Torah all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu, the Eibishter tells Moshe Rabbeinu that to tell the Yid that he has to be careful that his thought should be a pure thought. So this is where the struggle is, because speech, I could close my mouth, action, I could close my hand. But thought is something which mishatetes tamid, it always flows. So it's inevitable that from a Yid, because the machshava mishatetet tamid, which means it always flows, that his main challenge is in thought.
Okay,
now,
can we just unpack this a little bit more? I have a question on this.
Yeah, now I want to go over to what, don't remind me, or I don't want to lose one part. Again, that's the nice thing of, I can't tell anybody to come before Pesach, but if you get a chance, look in the end on TanyaOnline.com, because Alter Rebbe has separate 10 lines where he deals with this idea of keeping a pure mind, even when it comes to man and his fellow friend.
Right.
Okay?
Like Dalakatzchus kind of thing?
Dalakatzchus. The Rebbe says clearly, there's many times between man and his fellow friend that, again, you could divide it into thought, speech, and action. I want to do something negative to another person. I'm not allowed to. We know that. You just keep your hands to yourself.
But you can't think that. Is it a problem thinking?
Hold it. Yeah. Speaking as well, because speaking could be hurting and not a nice word. These are words that Hashem says, and again, black and white Shulchan Aruch, you're not allowed to. Right. But one thing is a person going to say, if you think in people in society, let me at least entertain my mind. I kill the other person. Right. I hate the other person. I curse the other person. Lashon Alter Rebbe, jealousy, anger, ikpeda. Let me at least entertain my mind with that, right?
Can you?
The halacha is, and Alter Rebbe emphasized over here, that this is where it comes to the prohibition of thought in the context of Bein Adam L'Chaveiro, between man and his fellow friend. It is a prohibition. You're not entertaining your mind. And if you think about it, what is, you think about also, you can see the difference of that and thinking about opening up a light on Shabbos. Thinking about Shabbos, I think I have nothing other word to describe this more so like a silly thought.
Okay, there's some that aren't silly. What if someone is thinking about cheating on his taxes?
Cheating on his taxes, that's already more of an exciting type of thought. Right? It's an exciting type of thought because he has already, you already hear someone.
It's not us or he does it.
So there, it could be not only that he does it just for one reason. It could be one reason because he doesn't have an animosity towards a particular person. It's more like the focus is his pocket of money. When you're fighting with someone else, when someone has a dispute with someone else, the famous story I heard from the Rebbe himself once, or it was a hookup, or I think it was a hookup or a tape. That sometimes a person could come with a piece of meat, and the animal, which could cost him $1,000, and the Rav could tell him it's puzzle. It's treif. He feels bad. He lost $1,000. That's it. He lost $1,000, and he knows how to get over with it. When he has a dispute with someone else, this guy says it's my animal, this guy says it's his animal, and the Rav paskins that really it's the other person's. At this point, he falls apart. He cannot handle, not so much that he had the monetary loss of $1,000, and the other one was victorious triumph over him. That is where the Ben Adam L'Chaveri. You think about taxes, I don't know exactly the halacha. Maybe you could take it, carry it over from the words of the Alter Rebbe. You could see again on TanyaOnline.com. You could try to look at the last part of chapter 12. This mamash, the last part of chapter 12, and see where you could stretch it. But I would just try to differentiate, because with taxes, you're not fighting with a particular person. You have an interest in that your pocket should be a bit more full. So you have an interest that your pocket should be more full. Is it a problem to entertain one's mind that I'll be able to be a richer person? I don't think it's a problem. Here we're dealing with a dispute you have with another person. There's a certain tiny pleasure that you harm the person in your thought. You build up like someone walks out from a lottery store. Famous example given. He walks out of a lottery store, he already has his mind what kind of car he's buying, what kind of trip he's taking, or what kind of house he's buying, what kind of tzedakah he's giving, because he's obviously winning, right? So there's a whole world which comes through. It's nonsense, right? Because the chances are one in millions. But he already built a whole scenario in his mind and saying that similarly, when someone has a dispute with somebody, even as a frumiyat, I'm not going to do anything wrong to him because it's revenge. I'm not going to go to someone and speak Lashon Hara because I'm a frumiyat, I won't speak Lashon Hara. But at least let me entertain my mind that this guy fell off a bridge. I don't know, when you have a dispute with somebody, when you're really bothered by the other person, and you feel that the least you can do is entertain your mind with your midas rois, with your negative midas. Theoretically, there's a whole level of entertainment when it comes to dispute with a friend, right? And with a fellow person or a friend or someone, an acquaintance, or anybody one gets a dispute, that even as a frumiyid, he feels at least I want to entertain my mind with hatred. Even I don't want to curse chas v'shalom the person, because cursing is already, you're verbalizing a negative word. It's also, but entertain my mind with hatred.
We can't do that.
So there, Torah says as well.
The reason I'm saying is because
that's it. The answer, you cannot do that, because that is a violation in thought. When Hashem gave the Torah, you see the luchas, half of it was man and his creator and heaven. So this carries the phenomenon of maintaining a pure thought. Also, which is a little chidush, and this is very different. Again, this is very different than thinking about opening the light on Shabbos. Like I said, I think that's more a silly thought, because there's no entertainment. I'm going to open the light on Shabbos. This is an entertainment. Talk to people who have disputes. They could really tear a person apart in their mind, and they feel good about it.
Right, but I've always learned, maybe I'm wrong, that's why this is very new to me, that whatever you have in your mind, and it's taros laHashem Elokeinu, it's all, whatever we have in our mind is to God. And if it's evil thoughts in our mind about anyone, we don't even get punished about that. If it's good things that we have for somebody like that, we get schar for that. So that's why this is so mind-boggling.
Well, now
I can think terrible things about someone because it
and when one yid does that, it's a violation.
But I don't act out on
now
it.
We know.
I don't talk the Lashon Hara, and I don't.
It's very similar now that you know that this is Torah, and this is Torah. It's new. That's why we learn and live and learn and grow in our Avodas Hashem. Now think about it in these terms: that somebody who is an immodest person, and he will say, I'm not going to do anything immodest. I'm not going to even speak in an immodest manner, which is, again, there's a taiva, there's a temptation, but I'm going to allow my thoughts to go as far as they could, or low as they can ever go, chas v'shalom, with immodesty. A from Yid will respond, no, you're not allowed to, because your eyes, your thought, and what you hear is a violation. Hashem says clearly that thought plays a role in our Torah mitzvahs. In other words, in Torah mitzvahs, thought also has its part. It's like someone's going to say, I won't hit the person, but I'll speak Lashon Hara. No, we understand Lashon Hara is a separate compartment in our service to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is again associated with our speech. Similarly, we tell a Yid that if you want to live a healthy fruma life, you have to be careful not to keep rather a pure mind. Similarly, when one ben adam lachaveirei, that when one is going to say, I'm not going to harm him, I'm not going to do anything wrong, I'm not going to cause that he should be damaged, chas v'shalom, because I'm a fruma Yid. Speak Lashon Hara, Hashem also says I'm not speaking Lashon Hara. But to entertain my mind, perhaps, it's exactly like someone's going to say, I'm going to allow my mind to fall very low with immodest thoughts.
So you know what, that gives us, like I think you were saying, really good control that we can get on that level, because the minute we think, we stop thinking, then we have a Benoni moment.
Absolutely.
So we're empowered.
It's probable that, and just like when it comes to immodest thoughts, you could come to a person not only every 5 minutes. A person could come every 5 seconds also.
Exactly.
Depends on when you're dealing with the people in society, these thoughts not only will, because when anybody lives in society, we always could believe that the other person is doing something wrong to me or to someone else. These thoughts will inevitably come up, and we have full control if we're going to accept them or not going to accept them.
So the responsibility is not in not having the thoughts. The thoughts will come,
but
it's just how much you're supposed to be able to
throw them out completely.
Turn it off in a second.
Just like when it comes to
because it takes a while. You have to think about it.
Right. So it's that constant.
So how quickly?
There's a metacognition.
Okay. So I'm going to tell you something. So you're just going to just put it the same thing. Min adam lamokim. If someone, let's say, again, based on based on what the lashon of the Alter Rebbe, or again based on halacha, simple halacha. The Torah says, someone's going to say, well, I'm going to be okay with gazing on a certain inappropriate billboard. Let's say, as an example, I'm saying this openly, and I was giving once a shir in Tanya, and somebody, we're trying to use these holy words of it, and someone says, Rabbi, do you mean controlling oneself looking at an inappropriate billboard? I said, 100% yes, because that's the clear halacha. It's not something which is... So someone's going to say, well, I'll take the few seconds to see what it is, and then I'll turn myself away. So it'll take time from the moment that I realize, or I'll make sure that I realize what it is, and then I will turn myself away. That is a clear violation, because to notice what it is, that's what your nefesh bahamis, that's the makeup of the nefesh bahamis, that's the makeup of the animal soul. It doesn't take time, it's even transcendent of time, because that's who we are. There's a reason why we're attracted to something, is because that's who we are. You don't have to gaze on something to find out what it is. It's the idea to know that this is you, and especially again by the Beinoni, he's the Kir Rasha. Right? He's not a tzaddik. He never made a dent in that animal soul, which is animalistically inclined, innately animalistically inclined. It's not a matter of time. Just like a person's hungry, does he have to start pondering on the phenomenon of food and this how it contributes to his body till he becomes hungry? No, it's a normal thing. The way we're created, there's certain times, if it goes by a few hours, we'll become hungry. The same thing. We are animalistic. We have an nefesh bahamis, and if it's intact and in its original strength and potency, we don't have to gaze on something to find that it's inappropriate, because that's what the nefesh bahamis is all about. When you say one has a nefesh bahamis, when you say that's what it is, the idea of it is that you don't pay initially attention to it. How long does it take? On the contrary, the moment you notice, the moment you have the notice, it could be not a second, it could be a millisecond, literally a thousandth of a second, because it's not something new you have to discover, because this is what the nefesh bahamis is all about. So one turns away. That's when he's the Beinoni, he's not the Rasha. So the same thing in Adam Lachaveire. Where does it come from, this anger, Lashon Alter Rebbe, anger, jealousy, envy, kpeda, which is again, it's a deeper type of hatred, expression of hatred. Where does it come from? Tables don't have anger, right? You could bang on the table, it's not angry at you. It's all part of the makeup of the human being, which is again the nefesh bahamis, certainly the animal soul. The godly soul doesn't have problems with the jealousy. Maybe he has an eager to be like someone else in his understanding of God and godliness, or understanding of Torah, the average anger or jealousy, envy, this is not associated with godly soul, not associated with anything else other than the innate animal which exists within ourselves. So that when you say it has to come up, then it has to make up what it is, and then I'll throw it out. You need not to do that, because it's going to come up, and this is the idea of the Beinoni. He's a kirasha type of person. It's normal when you're in society and you can have dispute with somebody that right away that these thoughts will come up. That he's a bum, I wish I could, that entertainment of hating somebody. Not even chas v'shalom cursing, like I said, maybe I was wrong, maybe I said the expression of cursing someone in your mind, that could carry negative weight as well. Just the idea of hatred is entertainment of hating another person. It's entertainment of the animal soul, just like it's entertainment of looking at something inappropriate. So the moment I notice that I have that hatred which is coming from the animal soul, I will not allow. The animal soul is potent, it's a kirasha, it will send a signal from the heart to the thought, think that. I will say, no, you're not coming in. To say that it's not, that I have to make up it's there, it's not there, it's obviously there. We know it as human beings. Why do we get angry? Why do we get jealous? Why do we have... Because that's what our Nefesh Bahamis is. God was speaking to the Jewish people and He said, Anechi Hashem Alikecha, the wait is 49 days. The greatest revelation of godliness. And Hashem opened... Like the Lashon Atahorei Saladas, He opened up all heavens and He exposed Himself to the Jewish people. And then you go further in the Aseret HaDibros, what is He speaking about? The simple things. Don't be jealous of this and don't jealous of that. You think to yourself, what? The answer is, this is what Aseret HaDibros is all about. Take that which is innately you and make sure that it just remains in a certain spot and don't allow it to become manifest, not in action, not in speech, not in thought. You're on the right path. But I didn't get rid of it. You're not a tzaddik. Maybe one day you will be. But once we know that it's not within our ability to become tzaddikim, our mandate is to be beinanim, and every time we don't allow, it's not like to say that I'm wasting my time. Every time, if you see in Perek Chav Zayin, the 22nd chapter, the 7th chapter, 27th chapter, the Rebbe says, 27th chapter, the Rebbe says that if in the Lashon Zayir it says this is the greatest pleasure Hashem has. I'm not sure exactly how, but this is the greatest pleasure Hashem has. And it says even more, in a sense, even more than the tzaddik. Because the tzaddik, he's kind of done with. He's done. He already transformed. Mm-hmm. The fact that a person could have in a millisecond, and through 24 hours, it could be as 10,000 thoughts that he had to push away. It's not exaggeration. Between man and his fellow friend, and generally to keep it 5,000, doesn't matter. It's the idea that it's not. There's no numbers to it. It's every time when he shut that faucet from the heart, that signal, or he put a block from the heart, which is again the station of the Nefesh Bahamis, if you remember, because this is the innate animal within us, and we say no to it. The pleasure in the heavens above is enormous.
Where does it say that about the pleasure that Hashem has?
So it's a lashon in Zohar, for that matter. Lashon Zohar, Mishim Bar Yochai, which is the author of the Zohar, and he writes there that just quote over here that Hiflig b'Zayir. Hiflig means Hiflig is Malashon like Hifli a little bit. It's a wondrous pleasure. And I said Begoidel Nachas Ruach. I'll translate the great pleasure of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kadiskafi Sitrach. In other words, when you bend, a tzaddik doesn't have to bend. If he transformed his Nefesh Bahamis, why he doesn't have to bend? But when the person bends down here, and the lashon is Yatir, it says it brings about the deepest parts of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yatir Mishvacha Achara, greater than any other praise. And that's why he comforts the Beinoni. Quote, it's interesting, the next line, we'll get to it, B'ez Hashem. Therefore, quote, therefore man should not fall in his spirit, and he should not feel bad, even he's going to be all his days in this war, in this struggle, Lashon Milchama, war, because maybe for this he was created, and this is his avodah, not to be a tzaddik, only to be a beinoni. That's powerful. It puts things in incredible perspective. So when you're saying that how practical the beinoni is, well, that's the most practical steps in our Avodas Hashem which we'll ever get, because again, most of the problems people have in the Avodas Hashem, because there's a confusion, there's kind of a blurry, ambiguous type of scenario. I was just love God in shul, and I walk out of shul and I have this stuff. Who's the real me? When you have set that clarity, it says Hashem's going to decide if you're going to become a tzaddik. In the meantime, our avodah is to be the beinoni. Means to say we will have those struggles. The animal within us is extremely potent. So as much as, again, we emphasized in the previous classes, it's very discouraging. But on the other hand, it's so encouraging because it sets such clarity and says that behema is intact. And therefore I'm a kirasha, but I have full control, just like I could close my hands and not do that. Or in mitzvah saseh, not to be laid back and with passion do that mitzvah. And the same thing with speech, to learn Torah with speech or to daven, and then again in the negative side, not to speak lashon hara. I have the full control. Similarly, I have the control of my thought, and to think appropriate things, again, which is the positive idea of mitzvah saseh, think words of Torah, whatever the machshav, our mandate and thought exists in as well. I have the full 100% capacity not to allow any signal which is coming from the heart, and it could come from the heart in the next 150 years, 120 years, because if Hashem decides I'm not going to be a tzaddik, I will be a Beinoni, means to say the animal within me is very strongly intact, like day one, Lashon Alter Rebbe, Kitul Dasa, the way I was born. One interesting thing, as Alter Rebbe adds, even Alter Rebbe says, not only that, but every day we live in this world, in a sense, we engage in worldly realities, we even strengthen our nefesh b'hamis. Not only we didn't get rid of it, right? Someone has a lavish breakfast. Who appreciated? Who was strengthened through that? The nefesh b'hamis. Every interaction in the world that strengthens. So again, what does that say? Alter Rebbe is not trying to discourage us. He's trying to say that. So therefore, we're kirosha on a constant basis. So we're going to have the same struggles as the average Rasha, right? But we are a Beinoni because we have the 100% capability or ability to control ourselves, not to speak, do, or speak, neither think anything which is contrary to us. Hashem. The Rebbe's Chidush in the end of the chapter is this, that not only between man and his creator, between man and his fellow friend. Again, the animal within us will innately look for ways to entertain its mind with hatred, jealousy, and so on. All the other characters which the average person has, Jew, non-Jew, that's the way, that's the makeup of the Nefesh B'hamis, but we will not let it in. One interesting thing I was hoping to do some text tonight, but as we're kind of a general overview, Alter Rebbe says one of the things that when he deals with a fellow friend, which he doesn't say when it comes to Beinodim Lalamokim, just because this is a very practical, pragmatic approach, how to control. In other words, like this, when it comes to something which is immodest, we know that it's just a bad matter of temptation. We know it's a temptation, which Hashem says, do not entertain your mind. Okay, and I know it's impure, and I know it's unclean, I know it's not the right thing, so I'll just throw it away. There's no gain of it. When it comes to someone, when Beinodim L'Chaveira, you not only hate, but you justify the hatred. It's not just like a wild thought, an immodest thought, inappropriate thought. You kind of justify, I hate him, he did something. So how do I get rid of that? In a sense, it's harder to get rid of that more than an immodest. I don't want to dirty my mind with something which is inappropriate. Right? Between Allah and Makkah, but look at the Chumash, and look at Shulchan Aruch, what Teda says. There's nothing gained. Other than my entertainment, there's nothing gained. Other than my animal soul indulging in another inappropriate pleasure, there's no gain. And I want to be aligned with Ratzon Hashem. I don't want to disconnect with Hashem for 1 moment. So there's something which is easier just to put a halt on it, that the signal should not enter in my thought. When it comes to Adam L'Chaveiri, with a man and his fellow friend, because you kind of you predicate the anger with some reality and someone. So in a sense, how do you deal with it? In a sense, it's harder to deal with. As Alter Rebbe says, when it comes to fellow friend, one of the ways to deal with it, you force yourself to act with this particular individual with kindness. That itself breaks that, because in a sense it's stronger. The hatred is stronger because you don't feel you're dirtying your mind. You just feel this is in reality. He did wrong, whatever it is. Now, Rebbe gives an example when it came to Yosef and his brothers, based on the Zayar. The Zayar, literally the last few words in the 12th chapters, it says, look in Zayar, like it says in Zayar, to learn from Yosef and his brothers, that they almost killed him. They did the unimaginable wrong. I mean, we can't even think to put ourselves into Yosef's shoes. A little boy of 17 years old, they wanted to literally kill him, and they sold him, and he sat in prison for 10 years, 12 years for nothing, for no reason, right? And then they came to him. He was there. It was the easiest target for revenge. He did this to me. I'm in power. So what he did was, he not only didn't take revenge, he went to the other extreme. He supported them, and he gave them a place to live, and he looked to increase their honor, among the Egyptians, and that effort that he invested lasted for decades. Who put them on this pedestal? Yosef himself. So somebody who they wronged him to no end. When we read the Chumash in Yosef, we can't believe how brothers could do something. And you see that 20 years later, when they had the problem, what came up to our mind? That we weren't sensitive to our brother. When they had the problems, when he was straightening them out a little bit, because you see, it was something which had a long-lasting effect, even in their minds, which they were the ones who sold him. You can imagine what Yosef felt, sitting in prison, thinking he's the only one among Egyptians, not one person who he knows, not one Jew, no one from his hometown, from his land, from his nation, from his blood, and he's the only reason he's sitting there for year after year after year is because of his brothers, and now his brothers come in front of him. It could have been just seconds, now I'm in charge. And what did he do? He just went to the other, he just didn't let them go. He went to the other extreme. He gave them whatever they need. So Alter Rebbe says, it brings from Zayah that we should learn from Yosef and Rabban that helps us also, not only not to accept, and especially it's hard in a sense not to accept because we believe that it's based on certain realities. So that person who you feel wronged you do good. That's a separate question. Why should in the end I do good? Why should I do good? And how can I really compel myself to do good if the person wronged me? So that's a separate whole thing. I mentioned it also. I have to mention, just because it's again based on another part of Tanya, not the first Likutei Amarim in Igeres HaKodesh, which is one of the parts of Tanya. I believe it's the 26th chapter, if I'm not mistaken. In any case, so one of the, I believe it's maybe 24. I think 24th chapter, the Alter Rebbe says that in the end of the day, like Yosef said, when his brothers came to him, what did he tell them? You're not the ones who sold me here. Hashem is the one who orchestrated this. So Alter Rebbe points out in the end that that's the macro picture of Yosef and his brother, but in the micro picture we could see the same thing. This person did something wrong to me. He didn't do wrong to you. Hashem orchestrated that wrong would happen to you. And if it wouldn't be him, it would be someone else. And why is it? So, on the other hand, this person who did it cannot say, "Oh, I'm a godly person," because at the end of the day I was God's messenger to say a bad word to this person or to harm him. No, you didn't do it because you felt God tapped you on the back and told you to be that good messenger. You did it because you had a negative bad midah, and you allowed your bad midah to come to be manifest in action to harm another person. Therefore there's the idea of retribution and so on. But from the perspective of the other person, if Hashem did not want this to happen to the person, it wouldn't, or rather Hashem if Hashem wants to happen, if Hashem didn't want to happen, it would never happen. Not through me, not through anybody else. The story of Elimelech and Abzusha, famous story that they used to go to Golus, the two brothers, the Talmidim and the Magi, the colleagues of the Alter Rebbe. You heard of them, right? So they were once in a tavern that they used to be. They wander, part of their Avodas Hashem, part of this, especially the yesteryear. This was a school of thought and of mortifying the body, the body, and so on, which was, again, it exists in different levels, even in every time. So they used to wander from city to city, and then they came to a tavern where they wanted to rest, and they were sitting by the oven, they fell asleep, and then the shikurim, the people, the non-Jews in the tavern, they were intoxicated, and then they started dancing, a regular tavern scenario, and all of a sudden they see two Jews. So they're going in circles, and they when they come around, the two Jews, they stampled on them, or they hit them. A Jew was free to hit or to step on and so on. And so Elimelech was inside, and it was closer to the oven, and he and Zusha was in the outside, or vice versa, one of the two. And whenever they went around the circle, or the head guy, whenever they hit Rav Zusha. In the middle of Elimelech tells Rav Zusha, he says, "Why should you be the one to get the klep all the time?" They either didn't care, because to them the bodies weren't a big deal, but they just said, let's change places, and then at least let me get a little bit of these hittings and steppings on. So they said, okay. So Zusha changes with Rabbi Elimelech. And as he changes, the head guy of the circle says, "Why are we only striking one Jew? Why don't we get the other Jew?" So they went back and hit the other one. And they did the same thing, and the other one was spared the entire time. Which means, in the end of the day, when something happens, even it's challenging. It's easier to say when someone slips in a piece of ice and hurts himself and says, "Well, that was a Ratzon Hashem," right? As opposed to somebody hits a person and harms him. That's very hard to dissect and to remove these two scenarios, or to try to differentiate or divide and say it's coming from Hashem, even though that person did something wrong. He was the one who harmed me. So we learn from Yosef this part as well. When Yosef approached his brothers, and his brothers approached him, he said, "You didn't send me here. Hashem orchestrated that I should be here. For what? Because He's found even a good reason to be able to sustain you for so many years and so on, like He did for decades, as opposed to if He wasn't around in Mitzrayim." But in every scenario, the Alter Rebbe says that it's not the other person harmed you. It's Hashem orchestrated. Unfortunately, it came to the other person. That person will be reprimanded because he didn't do it because he was God's messenger, but he didn't do it because of he's being God's messenger, right? So once we have that basis, it's easier for us also to deal with the other person with an midas chesed v'chibi yisera. The Alter Rebbe's suggestion, it's hard because we're human to bend ourselves, but we think about this concept as well, together with our making the effort to conduct with one's friend, a quote, to conduct with the same person who wronged you with an extra dosage of love and kindness, and a chiba yiseda, which means an extra belovedness, and to even tolerate him to the furthest extreme and not to get angry. It takes avodah, it takes effort, but this notion of Yosef and his brothers, that in the end everything comes from Hashem, allows us, makes it a bit easier to put things in perspective in order to go on. And once we do that, that will itself reduce the midah, the anger, because when you're doing kindness to the same person who harmed you, that itself reduces the anger. It doesn't allow that force of thought, of hatred and so on. So, to be continued, Be'ezus Hashem.